Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to members of the public joining us via live web stream this evening. I'd like to call our meeting, our council organizational meeting for Monday, December 7th to order at 6 p.m. And I am Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith, and joining me in the council chamber is Councillor Scott Garnett. And our 5 colleagues are joining us via Zoom this evening, and you can see them on your live webcast. And good evening to Councillor Sarah Duncan, Barbara Fallett, Terry O'Keefe, Chad Rintoul, and Peter Wainwright. Joining us in the council chamber this evening are our Chief Administrative Officer, Randy Humble, our Director of Corporate Services, Andrew Hissick, and our Corporate Officer, Sandy Nelson. I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging we're holding this evening's meeting in the territory of the Wasanich Nation. And I would look to colleagues for approval of our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I'd now like to turn to CEO Mr. Humble for recognition of our long-term employees. Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my distinct pleasure this evening to acknowledge and congratulate 3 Town of Sydney employees for long-term service recognition for this year, 2020. Unfortunately, given the COVID-19 pandemic, we aren't able to have our traditional council organizational meeting here this evening. And the employees being recognized aren't able to join us here in the council chambers to receive their recognition in person. But hopefully they're either tuning into the live webcast or can watch the recording at some point in the future. The first employee that I would like to recognize this evening started his career with the town in 2010 as a Laborer 1. In 2011, he was then appointed as a Laborer 2, and more recently this year was appointed as a Gardener 1 in the town's Parks Department. Mayor and Council, please join me in congratulating Mr. Tom Isherwood for 10 years of dedicated service with the town of Sydney. The next employee receiving long-term service recognition began his career in 2009 as a Laborer 1. He then quickly moved through the ranks in the Public Works Department as a Laborer 2 and Laborer 3, and in 2017 he was appointed as a charge hand in underground services. And more recently, in 2020, he was promoted as a crew chief in underground services. Mayor and Council, please join me in congratulating Mr. Matt Ewell for 10 years of dedicated service with the town of Sydney. The final employee receiving long-term service recognition began his career with the town in the Public Works Department as a Laborer 1 auxiliary. Through the years, he's held a number of positions in Public Works, including Laborer 2, duty person, and charge hand. In 2015, while still remaining as an employee of the town, he made a significant career change and took on the position of Deputy Fire Chief with the Town of Sydney Fire Department. Mayor and Council, please join me in congratulating Mr. Mike Harmon for 15 years of dedicated service with the town. So, Mr. Mayor, members of Council, that concludes the Town of Sydney staff long service recognition for 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I'd now like to turn to our citizen and council appointments under item 4, and I'll begin with item 4A, our citizen appointments. As members of the public will know, an important part of our engagement and community input and governance at the Town of Sydney is to have, we have several committees, commissions, and boards where citizens are appointed each year to serve in those roles as volunteers. And we certainly appreciate their interest and their service in whichever committee that they serve on. I'd like to begin with the Advisory Planning Commission. And the Advisory Planning Commission has 9 citizen members. And I'd like to first congratulate 6 individuals who have served the past 2 years on APC and will be serving a 2-year reappointment until the end of December 2022. So congratulations and thank you to John Crowhurst, Denny Jelena, Kelly Bold-Tomer, Bernadine Vandermeer, Clarence Bolt, and Douglas Watt. I'd also like to recognize and appoint, thank Mr. Richard Novick and Ms. Lucina Berryluke for their first-time appointment for 2 years until December 2022 as members of APC. That does leave one vacancy on the commission, and we will be issuing notice in the new year to fill that vacancy and one or two others that I will proceed to later this evening. I'd like to take this moment to thank and recognize 4 members of APC who have served the last 2 years on APC, and several of these individuals have served prior terms on APC, and we thank them for their previous service. Thank you to Don Carskadden, Patrick Colleen, Graydon Soul, and Donald McNamara. The second committee is our Economic Advisory Committee. And in January of 2020, the Council had established a new terms of reference and made new appointments to the committee. And 11 individuals that I will name will continue serving the second year of their 2-year appointment for 2021. And thank you to Brad Edgett, Denny Warner, Rod Hunchuk, Alyssa Gerwig, Frank Austin, Jennifer Mitchell, Dina Matheson, Stasia Hartley, Annalee Armstrong, Doug Walker, and David Calvely. We do have one vacancy on that committee as well, which will be posted with the notice in the new year. I'll turn next to the Beacon Wharf Select Committee. This committee was established earlier this year to look at options for our Beacon Wharf in the future. And we have three members of council and 2 members of the community at large. And we are pleased to extend the citizen appointments for Rob Milne and Scott Dallymore into 2021, when that committee will conclude its work and report to council. I next turn to the OCP Review Advisory Committee. This committee was established earlier this year when we launched the official community plan review for our community, a very important project. And we have 6 members of the community at large and 1 member of the Advisory Planning Commission that serve as volunteers as citizen members. And I'd like to thank David Cavally, Denny Jelena, Hannah Naroth, Marie Savage, Bernadine Vandermeer, Gay Van Siri, and Todd Wiebe, who will continue to serve until completion of the project anticipated towards the end of 2021. The town of Sydney is required to have a board of variance. It's required by legislation. However, our board of variance has not met since 2012 because no matters have been brought before it for members of the public. However, we do make appointments, and one appointment will continue. It's a 3-year term, continues until the end of 2022, and that's Mr. Tony Lomas. And we do have 2 vacancies presently on that committee. Next turn to the Peninsula Recreation Commission. As members of the public may know, the 3 municipalities each appoint their mayor, a councillor, and a citizen representative to serve as the 9-member commission for our recreation facilities that operate not only at the Panorama Recreation Center, but at Greenglade Middle School, Greenglade School, North Saanich Middle School, and also in Central Saanich. And we're pleased to reappoint Karen Frost as our citizen appointment for a 2-year term until December 2022, and thank Karen for her first 2 years of service on the commission. I'll next turn to 2 committees that work together and have similar work, and that is the CRD Saanich Peninsula Water Commission and the CRD Saanich Peninsula Wastewater Commissions. And we do have 1 resident each year that's appointed for a 1-year term to those 2 commissions. That position is currently vacant. We want to thank Michael Williams, who served in the past year in that role and has also served previously. And that position will be, citizen appointment will be posted early in the new year. Turning to the Victoria Airport Authority Board of Directors, the town of Sydney appoints 2 residents to that board, and we're pleased to have Wendy Everson complete her 3rd and final 2-year term, which will expire December 31st, 2022. And thanks also to Charles Lavallo, who is serving his 2nd 3-year term that will expire December 31st, 2023. And for the Victoria Airport Authority Noise Management Committee, we have one or two residents appointed for a one-year term, and we have been appointing one resident annually. And this year we have a new citizen, and thank you to Dr. Gerd Braun, who will serve for 2021. And thank you to Mr. Charles Wood, who served this past year on that committee. And thank you to our official town crier, Kenny Podmore. Kenny will be going into year 3 of his 4-year term, which is concurrent with our council term, representing the town as town crier at functions. Of course, with the pandemic this year, there's been much fewer than we would like, and we certainly hope to be able to continue with public functions at the earliest opportunity when it's safe to do so, sometime in 2021. Lastly, I would just like to take a moment to thank the 7 citizen members of the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force. That committee's terms of reference concluded this month, but I did want to express appreciation on behalf of council for the service to these individuals on that committee. And thank you to Graydon Soul, David Calvely, Denny Warner, Morgan Shaw, Kristen Norris, Steve Duck, and Glynis Cavers. Colleagues, that concludes the list of appointments, and I would seek a motion that the appointments be approved as presented.
I'll move the appointments be approved as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I'll next turn to item 4B, which is our council appointments to committees, commissions, and boards. And as members of the public know, council generally meets twice a month as council and twice a month as committee of the whole. We do meet a little less frequently in the summer and occasionally, sometimes in December. However, in addition to our regular meetings each month, the 7 members of your elected councils serve on 31 different committees, commissions, and boards in Sydney, in sub-regional services on the peninsula, and in the Capital Regional District. And I would like to proceed through those 31 appointments. Members of council serve as either non-voting liaisons in these roles, or they may serve as members, voting members, or board members on these commissions and boards. And so I'll begin with the Advisory Planning Commission, and we appoint for 2021 Councillor Rintoul and alternate Councillor Wainwright. And I want to thank Councillor Wainwright for serving as liaison for the past 2 years, council liaison for the past 2 years on the APC. For our Emergency Planning Committee, which meets on a monthly basis as well, we are appointing Councillor O'Keefe as the voting member and Councillor Fallett as the alternate. And again, thank Councillor Wainwright for serving on that committee for the past 2 years. Committee of the Whole is one of the standing committees, and all members of council, as I indicated at the top, are members of that. Turning to select committees, we have our Economic Advisory Committee, and we have Councillor Wainwright serving as the liaison, and Councillor Rintoul as the alternate. And I want to thank Councillor Rintoul for chairing that, or for being liaison to that committee over the past year. In our Beacon Wharf Select Committee, we have 3 council representatives, and thank you to Councillor Duncan, Rintoul, and Wainwright for serving over the past year and continuing to serve until that committee completes its work in 2021. The Official Community Plan Review Advisory Committee, I am appointed to that committee along with Councillor Wainwright. We've been serving since that committee began earlier in the year, and will continue until that committee concludes its work. Turning to some external agencies, there are the Capital Regional District Board, the Capital Regional Housing Corporation Board, and the Capital Regional Hospital District Board. Those 3 boards meet on a monthly basis at the CRD head offices, and I am appointed as a voting director on those 3 boards, and Councillor Fallett is appointed as my alternate to those 3 boards. The 10th is the CRD Regional Water Supply Commission, and thank you to Councillor Duncan, who served the last 2 years and will continue to serve in that 4-year term with Councillor O'Keefe as the alternate. Turning to the Municipal Insurance Association of BC, providing important services to municipalities throughout the province. They do have an annual general meeting, which requires a municipal appointment. I'm appointed to that as a 4-year term, and Councillor Rintoul and Councillor Wainwright are appointed as alternates if I'm unable to attend. The 12th is the CRD Climate Action Intermunicipal Task Force, and that is also a 4-year term with CRD, and Councillor Duncan has been serving the past 2 years and will continue in that role for the next 2 years with Councillor Fallett as the alternate. Then we have the CRD Regional Housing Trust Fund Commission. That's a 2-year term, and thank you to Barbara Fallett, Councillor Fallett, who's been serving over the past 2 years on that commission, and Councillor O'Keefe will serve over the next 2 years in that role with Councillor Duncan as the alternate. We mentioned in the citizen appointments the CRD Peninsula Recreation Committee. Myself as mayor is appointed to that commission along with Councillor Rintoul. We've been serving 2 years and will continue for the next 2 years. And we have Councillor Fallett and Councillor Garnett as our alternates. Turning to the CRD Saanich Peninsula Water Commission and the Wastewater Commission, we have Councillor Fallett, who will serve as commissioner, and Councillor Duncan, who will serve as commissioner. And thank you to Councillor Wainwright, who has served over the past 2 years on both of those commissions and has been chair of those commissions during the past 2 years. Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Wainwright will be the alternates to Councillor Fallett and Duncan. And with the Vancouver Island Regional Library, also known as VERL, the library system encompassing most of Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast, with 39 branches. We have the Sydney North Saanich branch here in Sydney that we share with North Saanich residents. And thank you to Councillor Fallett for her service over the last 2 years on the Board of Trustees, and we're pleased to appoint Councillor Wainwright for a 1-year term. And Councillor Wainwright brings experience from his previous terms on council to that Board of Trustees, and Councillor Fallett will serve as alternate. We have the Capital Region Emergency Services Telecommunications, better known, I think, as CREST, and Councillor Rintoul has been serving on the Board of Directors for the past 2 years and will continue with a 1-year term with myself as his alternate. There is the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, and they have representatives from all of the municipalities in the Capital Regional District. Councillor Fallett has been serving over the past 2 years, and we're thankful for that. And she will continue to serve in 2021 with Councillor O'Keefe as her alternate. There's the Greater Victoria Labour Relations Association, and I will serve a 1-year term in 2021 with Councillor Wainwright as my alternate. We have the Victoria Airport Authority Airport Consultative Committee. Councillor Rintoul has been serving over the past 2 years and will continue in 2021 with Councillor Garnett as his alternate. And there's the Victoria Airport Authority Noise Management Committee, and Councillor O'Keefe is appointed to continue in that role with Councillor Fallett as her alternate. The South Island Prosperity Partnership meets on a monthly basis. I've been serving over the first 2 years on that Partners Committee, and Councillor O'Keefe is appointed for 2021 with Councillor Rintoul as her alternate. Turning to the Sydney and North Saanich Ball Facility Liaison Committee, again, this is a joint committee with North Saanich with for the baseball facilities located in North Saanich, and we have Councillor Garnett and Councillor Rintoul appointed to that committee with myself as alternate. That committee has not met in quite some time. I'll just mention it if members of the public are wondering why there haven't been council updates from time to time. It is by agreement that we have such a committee, but due to the work of staff in Sydney and North Saanich, there hasn't been a need for that committee to meet for some time, but we are required to make the appointments. And several of our community organizations, beginning with the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, each of the 3 municipalities on the peninsula appoint a councillor as liaison, and we're pleased to have Councillor O'Keefe continue to attend monthly meetings as liaison for Sydney with Councillor Rintoul as alternate. The Memorial Park Society, which we know better as the Mary Winspear Centre, our community centre, and Blue Heron Park, which includes the fields that Peninsula Soccer operates and the track that the community and Parkland School use. And thank you to Councillor Rintoul, who's served on the MPS board as liaison for the past 2 years, and Councillor Garnett is appointed to that board, liaison board, for the next year with Councillor Rintoul as alternate. The Sydney Museum and Archives Society meets on a monthly basis, operates the Sydney Museum here in downtown Sydney, and Councillor Garnett has been serving for the past 2 years and will continue. And we thank him. Thank you for that service. And Councillor Duncan will serve as the alternate. The New Marine Centre Society, better known as the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea, meets on a monthly basis. And thank you to Councillor O'Keefe, who's been serving the past year on that as liaison to that board. And Councillor Garnett will also take that role for the next year with Councillor O'Keefe as alternate. And then we have the Artsea, also known as the Community the Community Arts Council of the Sandwich Peninsula. Councillor Fallot has been serving on that board as liaison to that board for the past 2 years and will continue in 2021 with Councillor O'Keefe as her alternate. And the Downtown Sydney Business Improvement Area Society, Councillor O'Keefe, thanks to Councillor O'Keefe for serving over the past year, and Councillor Duncan will take on that as a new role in 2021 with Councillor O'Keefe as alternate. And last but not least, the Peninsula Stream Society, which meets approximately 4 times per year. Councillor Duncan was a new appointment to that committee, that society board in this year, in 2020, and will continue in 2021 with myself as her alternate. So, council colleagues, that concludes my presentation of the appointments for 2021.
I'll move the appointments be approved as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to item 5, which is the 2021 acting mayor appointments. As members of the public may know, I chair council meetings when we meet twice a month, but the other six council members serve as chair of the committee of the whole. They each take 2 months of the year, and there is no change for 2021, but I'll just read them out quickly. In January and July, Councillor Garnett will be acting mayor. In February and August, Councillor Duncan will be acting mayor. In March and October, it will be Councillor Wainwright. In April and October will be Councillor Fallot. In May and November will be Councillor Rintoul. And in June and December will be Councillor O'Keefe. Another role for acting mayor is to serve as mayor in my absence if I'm away. And I would look for a motion, please, colleagues.
Move that the appointments be approved as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to 2 items of regular business on our agenda this evening. And the first is item 6A, which is a staff report at the request of council. The report is dated November 23rd, which is with regards to our council meetings and electronic participation. And I'll turn to Mr. Humble for an introduction, and then we can go to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess at a council meeting in October, council passed two resolutions. One was that requesting staff to look into options for all council members who are participating in the meeting by remote video or Zoom, requesting that some type of format be set up so that they can be viewed by the public. The second resolution was that staff look into a form of protocol process for various forms of public presenters, whether that be via public participation, public hearing speakers, as well as presenters. And this was either over the phone or Zoom, and that it be referred back to staff for an overview of the protocol. So based on the resolutions, staff have reviewed both the technical and some of the non-technical options available and have outlined them in the report for council's consideration. So very briefly, regarding the first resolution, two things are happening on that particular front. Firstly, in the event that more councillors do start eventually attending meetings in person at the council chambers, plexiglass barriers have been ordered, and they will soon be installed between individual members at the council table. It should be noted, however, that again, these plexiglass barriers probably won't be used until we see a significant reduction in the number of COVID cases, and we see the possibility of more councillors attending the meetings in person. Secondly, regarding remote participation by councillors and the potential for them being seen by the public via Zoom, staff have, and we piloted it at the last meeting, and I think we've successfully implemented the technological aspects that allow for a picture-in-picture mode. So this is something that integrates the Zoom platform with the town's live stream program. So the public, when viewing live, can now see all councillors that are attending electronically. And this also applies to the recorded version as well. So we're doing that now, and it's happening as we speak via the live webcast. And then finally, in terms of the second resolution, in the report, staff have provided a summary of the protocols that are currently in place for the various participatory options, including public participation period, public hearings, and presentations by presenters. And it's pretty well covered in the report, Mr. Mayor, but if there are any questions from council, staff would be pleased to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I'll turn to colleagues for any questions, and if we can hold comments until we would then go forward with a resolution. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. I certainly support the recommendation, the motion that accompanies it. By way of expectation through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, if I may, the first page of the report, the last sentence reads, should council wish to continue to allow for electronic participation following the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, the procedure bylaw would require an amendment. And I know we spoke about this, the prospect of this previously. For example, in a scenario where a member of council may have a minor illness, like cold, but not wanting to share it with their colleagues, to have the option to participate electronically. Or perhaps even in the case of committee meetings, frankly, where members who participate in committees, I'm talking about members of the public who participate in committees, who likewise may suffer from a minor illness, or should council find it appropriate that the means of video recording these meetings to be very comprehensive and I think provide a real level of transparency around the proceedings in such meetings. If we would like to have staff revisit the council procedures bylaw to this particular end, to staff, would you look for a motion of that nature this evening, or would you suggest we revisit that at such time as we return to normal proceedings?
Thank you for the question. I'll turn to Mr. Humble.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. I would suggest that it's not necessary to make a motion to that effect this evening. The staff do plan on bringing, there is some housekeeping items that need to be undertaken with respect to the procedures bylaw, and we would potentially look to do so early in the new year if that's council's wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that the technical upgrade and improved protocol for public participation at council meetings as outlined in the staff report be approved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I would just like to make a comment to the public, actually to colleagues and council colleagues and to staff, that we're now in our, I think it's the 10th month of the pandemic, and we've been meeting in this fashion now for many, many months. And I have to say that it still feels odd. And while we are conducting the town business, and I think we are doing it, we are doing well, and we are transparent as we can be to the public. Quite frankly, it is not the same for me, and to not have my council colleagues here with me in the chamber. That is, we miss you, and to not have the regular staff in attendance that we do as well. But most importantly, is members of the public. To members of the public, I have to say it feels odd. It still feels odd addressing you through a microphone and a little blue eye in the ceiling. On matters of important to everyone in our community. However, we are operating as per the provincial health orders for safety and for transparency to the public, and I think that's important. I want to thank staff for the little technical improvement that's allowed all of council members and any guest speakers or presenters to be viewed on the live webcast, and we anticipate that the recommendations we approve tonight will also streamline some of the procedure we have when we do have public participation periods, or when at such time that we have public hearings. But I just wanted to make that comment, and I know I know my colleagues join me, council colleagues join me, and staff join me, and many members of the public that I met on the street or spoken with on the phone or met in Zoom meetings. We have all of our committee meetings, the advisory planning, the APC meets, the OCP review committee, the Beacon Wharf committee, many of these committees that we've made appointments tonight, whether it's citizen appointments or councillor appointments, are currently meeting by Zoom, and we all do look forward to meeting in person again, which will be better engagement with our community. Thank you. I'll next turn to the second staff report, which is item 6B, grants and aid policy and budget, and a brief introduction from Mr. Hisik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you'll recall, following consideration of grants earlier this year, Council requested a follow-up report on the grants budget over the years, including the conversion of certain recurring requests into line items in the annual budget. In addition, Council requested a 5-year history of grant requests and awards, as well as an opportunity to discuss the current grants policy. All of that has been provided in the report. In terms of an update, there will be a report coming forward on arts funding at the next council meeting. Beyond that, everything is as indicated in the report, and I'm available for any questions.
I'll turn to questions first, or we do have a series of, they're not necessarily recommendations, but they're items to consider for recommendations. Open the floor to colleagues. Councillor Rantoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take it through this discussion, staff are looking for some guidance on how to proceed, and hence the nature of some of the recommendations that are summarized. One item perhaps I might like to see revised with respect to the policy and procedures document around grants and aid that we currently have is under bullet number 4, where it lists requests that shall be provided to accompany an application. I would like to see included on that list a financial statement for the prior period. I recognize that the application itself makes reference to the financials, but our policy does not. And I've certainly found that when we're evaluating these on an annual basis, it tends to be hit and miss in terms of which organizations have provided some level of financial information versus others. And I know on occasion we've discounted or dismissed applications on that basis. So for point of clarification to the applicants themselves, I'd like to see that included in the policy and procedures document. So I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, to Mr. Hisik, is that something that you can note, or would you like to see a motion with respect to a number of changes that are being suggested?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't necessarily think we need a motion on every suggestion. I think let's see how the discussion goes, and I could follow up with what I heard and bring back another draft of the policy for consideration.
Thank you. I think that makes sense, Mr. Hissick. So you've got my comments there. I'll leave it there for the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I'll take a moment to touch on one item, and that is both the policy under 4A states provide a description of what the project will accomplish. And then on the application form, it says attach a complete financial statement for your organization and budget for the project initiative that is the subject of this application. So the policy and the application are constructed such that there is reference to each of these organizations seeking funds for a particular project. In reality, my experience has been with not all of the applicants, but certainly with a number of the applicants, that the funds that we are providing are actually going to general revenue. The organization is fairly small, they have limited budgets, and it's going to general revenue. And I find the applications in this first 2 years of this term, and having served a previous term, are I don't want to say manipulated, but the applicant is reaching to try to indicate a particular project or initiative when really it's going to general operating. And I think in many instances it's a reasonable request to have it go. Is it going to MOPS? Is it going to equipment? Is it going to? I mean, it's pretty subjective in many cases. So I would ask staff or for further input, other input from colleagues, whether that policy could be amended to leave it open to for organizations making a request to ask for it as general revenues, or if they wish to ask for a particular initiative. Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Duncan.
Are we providing our comments now, or are you just looking for questions for staff?
Well,
Just to
staff provided, thanks, Councillor O'Keefe, for the question. Staff provided under recommendations, 3 topics for us that we could make recommendations on.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can just make suggestions. I mean, Councillor O'Toole did bring a point up, and it's been noted by staff. Again, I could turn to staff and ask if my comments, if they're supported by colleagues, could be taken without resolution for the next draft.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm mulling it over in my mind as to how I might accomplish what you seem to be desiring in that respect, but perhaps I'll get there.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn back to Councillor O'Keefe.
Okay, thanks. So I do have a few comments and recommendations. I think there was some good, staff pointed us into a couple of directions here in some of the comments they made in the report, so I'm appreciative of that. And as council knows, it did a sort of a bit of a review about what some other organizations with similar populations around the province and the CRD are doing with their grants and aid policy. So after looking at that, there's a few things that I thought would be useful to have in our policy and procedures. One thing that seemed to be a common thing was the criteria that the organization must be located in Sydney or provide services to Sydney residents. So that would rule out sort of national charitable organizations that do these broad campaigns. I also thought that I don't think that we've noted it in our policy, but most of them did, and I think it's reasonable to include that they also must demonstrate financial need. Another one that I thought was useful is that we wouldn't provide funds to organizations that provides grants to others. And I guess the rationale behind that is if they can afford to give out money to other organizations, why would we be giving them money to give to somebody else? So I thought that was a good one to consider. That we wouldn't provide assistance or funds if there's another, the project that they're asking for support for comes under the responsibility of another level of government. So that might include, for example, we've seen requests in the past from healthcare associations, that sort of thing. I like the idea that they would acknowledge the support of the town in any of their print or their online materials. That priority would be given to applications that align with council's strategic goals and objectives. Excuse me. I also liked to have something about that they would outline how accessibility issues would be accommodated for people who might be participating in their program or event. And then also in terms of eligibility criteria, I'm leaning a bit more to the idea that the funds should be for a specific project initiative and not for ongoing general operating expenses. And what I saw in a lot of the other municipalities is if there was sort of an ongoing need that was perceived, that they would include that as a line item, and I think staff have noted that as well. So those are some of the things in regards to the policy. In regards to the reference to the Economic Development Fund, my comment on that is I don't think, when I look at the organizations that we provided funding for over the last few years, most of those were to fund cultural or community projects. They're not things that I would classify and that I see in other municipalities that are specifically for the purpose of economic development or helping support our business community. They do have some economic benefit because they're events, usually arts or cultural events, and they have economic spin-offs, but they're not something that I would classify as an economic development initiative. So my preference would be that we don't include economic development initiatives under grants and aid. We're having a discussion with budget planning in the new year, and I think that's the appropriate time to talk about economic development and what sort of funds we want to see devoted to that, along with a strategy on how we would develop that. Just lastly, in regards to the arts funding, I do like the idea of establishing the local arts funding program, and I guess we'll hear more about that. So I'll leave that for now, and I'll interested to hear comments from the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had comments on a bunch of the things that Councillor O'Keefe brought up. I don't know if I can remember all of them that came up.
Councillor Duncan.
Primarily, I agreed with what the mayor said earlier about getting the policy and the application in alignment with not having a project in there. So in point 4A, where the description of what the project will accomplish, and I know that Councillor O'Keefe has essentially said the opposite, that in that some of the other municipalities, have ruled out that these things can go to organizational expenses. But I mean, we explicitly gave to Peninsula Streams for organizational expenses last year. And for a lot of these organizations, there's 12 organizations I counted on that list that we have given to every year in the past 5 years. And presumably these are general revenue, these are operational expenses. And if anyone who's ever worked in the nonprofit sector knows that is the hardest thing to get funding for, because all grants are based on projects, and yet actually getting regular funding that allows you to buy staples, maybe pay your staff, or like you said, MOPS, it can be the biggest thing. So I actually don't mind being one of the municipalities that allows that. I think that's one of the biggest things that can help some of these community organizations continue to exist. I also noticed that a lot of them did not allow organizations to apply more than 3 years in a row, which would rule out, half the organizations that are on this list. And this is where this discussion came up last year. And I was one of those who was saying some of these organizations, if they're relying on this every year, should they not be a line item? Though staff has kind of addressed that with, for these small amounts of money, most of these organizations who apply every year, it's $500. It was about half of what we give away every year. But it's easier for them to track the board members and things like that. And whatever is easier for staff to keep track of in the administration of that small amount, I don't have a problem with that. I also, I guess, still like the idea that maybe one year they won't apply and that money could go to a new organization. I do like the idea that organizations, I think this Central Saanich had this one, that if they receive in excess of $1,000, they won't be eligible for funds the following year. And I'd almost make that say, 3 years in a row, because if we had put that cap on it, we would have also capped the Marine Rescue Society, and I don't think we want to hamstring council and future councils from being able to meet a need like that. So having some of a cap on the amount and some cap on the number of times you can get a larger amount, I'm in favor of. The national fundraising campaigns, I know that we had discussed this as well, and in making that explicit that, in point 4C, the intended community benefit is specifically the Sydney community, and perhaps we should make that more explicit. I worry it would rule out Wounded Warrior, and especially knowing that we had a partnership with them this year for mental health services for our own emergency responders, and I worry that would then limit funding some organizations that have national campaigns in character, but they do end up forming partnerships or giving some benefit to our local community. But I don't think that would rule that out as long as we make sure that these organizations that are fundraising from us do intend to do some work in our community in the next little while. And I guess my last point was to Councillor O'Keefe, had mentioned it, and it was in her research as well, about limiting to things that are the responsibility of other levels of government. And certainly that would probably limit ORCA, as dental hygiene healthcare should be at a provincial level of government, or should be a higher level of government than the municipal, but I feel that in principle it's something that should be made explicit, but in practice, I don't like the idea of limiting future councils from being able to put forward a small amount of money that might help a local need because it's fallen through the crack, and it could take a lot of time to get a higher level of government to actually come around to addressing that need. And I don't want to hamstring from being able to actually help if capable of it, simply because higher level of government has dropped a ball, possibly for a long time. So I'm happy with ours not actually intentionally excluding those organizations, and I think that's something that individual councils will discuss as they review the merits of each crop of applications that come in, whether this is something that they should fund or not. But I don't want to explicitly put it in the policy to make sure that it couldn't be done by a future council. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I agree with a lot of the comments that my colleagues have made, but I guess I'm not sure that there is actually a need to formally amend the policy. And part of the reason I'm saying that is it is just a policy. Future councils can amend it on the spot if they decide to. So it's not really going to bind anybody to anything. So the way it has significant influence on this council and future councils is if the policy has got robust support from our community, as opposed to a policy that is developed, by a council and doesn't have that endorsement by the community. So I mean, there's some. I can see trying to tweak this and see if the community supports it, and if they do, then if there's strong community support, that provides some direction. But the end of the day, the devil's in the details. The council is going to look at whatever applications come in, and if there's something that looks like it really has merit that doesn't fit the policy, council's going to do it anyway. And in fact, council's going to be upset with staff if they exclude a proposal that really has merit just because it doesn't fit the policy. The other thing that I would be really cautious about is ensuring that we don't make the application too onerous. If you ask for too much information and it becomes a lot of effort to apply, you're deliberately discouraging the smaller organizations and kind of setting it up that only the larger ones with that kind of capacity will take the time to apply. So I guess those are sort of my comments. I would support having a discussion about potentially moving some of the ones we've been funding routinely into line items and maybe reducing the budget accordingly. And I'm also comfortable with some of the discussion about do we want to limit this to projects, and I am leaning towards no. I'm simply interested in hearing what the funds will be used to accomplish, as opposed to what project the funds will be used for. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thanks, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett and then be speaker after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with many of the comments that Councillor Wainwright just made. The exception being that I just feel like if we do move some of these to line items, I would be happy keeping the budget where it is, because I was actually considering that we maybe need to raise the budget just a little bit, just given the climate we're in. We don't have to necessarily, I believe, if I can refer to staff, we have a certain amount of money in there, but we don't have to give all of it away, correct? So I would like to have a little more leeway in that budget. So if something or organizations come forward with a demand that seems to be something that would be really a priority and we want to do, we have a little more wiggle room to work with. And that's just sort of the way I feel about all of the potential changes. I just feel like at this point in time, I'd like to do a little bit more, or at least have the potential to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I want to concur with Councillor Wainwright on the current policy and proceeding. When you look at the list that staff provided, there's some 40 organizations that we have provided grants to over the last 4 or 5 years, and we know that from experience that we get 4 or 5 times the amount requested than we actually give, and so it does present a challenge in making decisions. It's going to be difficult to come, when you look at these 40 organizations in this list, there is immense diversity in the nature of the organizations and what they do in our community. And the intent of adding some parts to policy, may inadvertently, as I think Councillor Wainwright was indicating, may inadvertently exclude one of them when it would be reasonable, or a majority of council may feel it warrants a grant. The only pause for consideration that I have is the councillor comment with regards to a cap on the amount in a year or a cap on a number of years. And I think if there was a cap on the amount of a grant in any given year, I think it would be a message to applicants, because each year we do get some pretty large grants, and we wonder if the applicant has actually looked at how much we're actually granting. They actually ask for more money than our entire grants and aid budget. So if it was included in the as part of policy, then again, if it was policy, we could we could just use that as guidance and go over and above. But I'll leave it there and turn to any additional colleagues. I would just suggest that now is the time to suggest or should we seek staff's guidance in a list of organizations that we might seek to make line items. But we do know that with regards to the culture organizations in particular, of which there's nearly 10 or a dozen each year, or sorry, over years there's that many different ones, that we are still to consider arts policy going into budget deliberations. So I would suggest that we hold off on making recommendations particular to that until we've considered what council wants to do with local and regional arts. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was also going to leave the arts topic alone, I'm certainly open to some other ones, but I noticed that Greater Victoria Bike to Work Society, we've given them $500 a year for the last 5 years. I can see making that one a line item and dispensing with making them apply. I also note that 667 Kitty Hawk, the Navy League, the Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society, and Peninsula Dry Grad, every year we've given them some money. Now, with those 4 organizations, the requests vary from year to year and the amount varies from year to year, but there does appear to be a minimum that we could guarantee. And then they would only apply if they actually had some rationale for needing more, which is easier for them and it's easier for us. And they really would have to justify the why do we need more. So those ones I would be, quite comfortable considering as line items as well. And we could talk about the amounts. Those would be the 5 I would propose.
Okay, Councillor Wainwright, if I might, I agree with the suggestion. I'm thinking of timing, and one of the things that may or may not be helpful to council is if we had a current list of all the line items, not for grants and aid, but what have become line items in the budget. And as is indicated in the staff report, the total of those amounts has grown over time to $984,000 to numerous organizations. I can't remember whether it's 12 or 15 or more than that. We converted the Victoria Film Commission to a line item, I think, in one of our first 2 years at $500. So my suggestion in terms of timing is, for consideration, is that we actually bring this list forward during our budget deliberations and decide, and at that time we will have the list of all of the line items currently in the budget, and we can see what might fit as you've indicated at that time. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a good suggestion that the mayor's come up with to try and view these items, which may these organizations which may be moved as line items in the budget as part of that process. I think Councillor Wainwright has a good suggestion in terms of how to identify those to be helpful to staff in that process. I support the idea of moving some of those into the budget as line items, particularly in the current economic climate. I think it's challenging enough for these organizations to operate without the uncertainty annually of going to seek funding through the grant and aid process. I think moving them to a line item in the budget will give them some surety. Having said that, my expectation would be that an organization receiving funding as a line item in the budget would still be reporting out annually, perhaps in writing to council, to the town, in order to illustrate how it is, what initiatives they've undertaken, and how it is they spent that money. So I don't think it takes away from the accountability aspect of putting funds as opposed to an application process to a budget line item. The other item I picked up on, certainly during conversation, was council members suggesting that the grant and aid application, be retained in sort of a simple format so that we're not excluding any organizations. And perhaps to that end, on page 2 of the application, the 5th request on there, and I referred to it earlier, is around financial statements. However, we request for the last complete audited financial statements. I think it highly unlikely that these organizations have audited the financial statements given the costs associated with that. And so when staff are refining this process, I would suggest that the word audited be removed from the application. And lastly, I concur with Councillor O'Keefe's suggestion that we not look to provide funding to organizations through the grant and aid process that may be in turn granting funds to other events or organizations. I think we should probably take the approach that Councillor O'Keefe suggested, that if they've got sufficient funds to be in a position to grant, that they likely shouldn't be under consideration for grant and aid. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. So I'll leave it to council to either make a recommendation or receive this report for information.
I'll move that we receive the report for information.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion on that, and thank you to staff for the report. That takes us to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.